A flower-covered boy points at a billionaire and screams, "Daddy," and 3 days before his wedding, Minjun Park's entire empire begins to crack. She says the child isn't his. The DNA test says otherwise. 5 years. Gone. Now his own mother is filing court petitions. A grieving widow is rebuilding walls faster than he can tear them down. And the son he never knew is asking one devastating question. Will you go away again? Some fortunes can't be bought back. Only earned. This story has a part 1, so if you haven't seen it yet, go check that first so this makes sense. Hey family, welcome to my story channel. Please subscribe and give this video a like, it truly means the world to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you so much for the support. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. 6 months of showing up. 6 months of frosting-covered weekends, burned pancakes, and Mario Kart defeats at the hands of a 5-year-old who celebrated every victory like he'd won the World Cup. 6 months of something that felt terrifyingly, beautifully close to a real family. Minjun should have known it was too good to last. The call came on a Tuesday morning. He was in the middle of helping Elijah glue cotton balls onto a school project about clouds when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it. Mr. Park. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, the kind of voice that delivered catastrophic news with the warmth of a weather forecast. My name is Attorney Shin Jae-won. I represent the Park family estate. I believe you know why I'm calling. Minjun set down the glue stick slowly. Elijah, go wash your hands, buddy. But Appa, we're not done with the 2 minutes. Go on. The boy scrambled off the kitchen chair, and Minjun stepped onto the balcony, sliding the glass door shut behind him. Tell me, he said flatly, your mother has filed a petition to the family court. Attorney Shin continued, unbothered. She is requesting formal legal acknowledgement of Elijah Chun as a Park family heir. She wants the boy's surname legally changed to Park. She wants full financial disclosure, a structured custody arrangement, and representation in decisions regarding the child's education and future. Minjun gripped the railing. The city below him hummed, oblivious. She wants control, he said. She wants what is best for the family legacy. Her words, not mine. And if I refuse to cooperate with this petition? Pause, carefully calculated. Then she proceeds without your cooperation. The DNA results are already in her possession, Mr. Park. She had her own independent test conducted 3 weeks ago. The balcony seemed to tilt beneath his feet. How did she? Your investigator, Mr. Kong. He is, I'm sorry to say, thorough in his reporting to multiple clients. Minjun ended the call. He stood in the cold morning air staring at the skyline for a long moment, at the towers of glass and steel that represented everything he'd spent his 20s sacrificing love to build. Then Elijah knocked on the glass door, hands dripping water onto the floor, grinning like he'd done something tremendously clever. I washed them, Appa. Can we finish the clouds? Mine's going to be the biggest one. Minjun looked at his son's face, his nose, his eyes, his absolute, unselfconscious joy. Something hardened in his chest like iron cooling in a mold. Not this time. Nobody is turning this child into a chess piece. Not even my own mother. He told Amara that evening after Elijah was asleep. His small body curled around a stuffed bear that had seen better decades. She sat very still at the kitchen table while Minjun explained everything. He watched the color drain from her face, then rush back in a wave as fury replaced shock, filling her eyes with a light that was nothing like warmth. She had her own DNA test conducted, Amara said quietly. Yes, without my permission, without Elijah's knowledge. She went around both of us like we were obstacles in a corridor. Her voice was low and dangerous in a way that reminded him exactly why he'd fallen in love with her across a coffee shop table a decade ago. This woman hasn't even properly introduced herself to my son, and she's filing petitions about his surname. I know, Amara. Don't I know me right now? She stood, pressing both hands flat on the table. Minjun, I need you to hear me clearly. Elijah is my son. I raised him alone through a pregnancy, through a marriage, through losing David, through rebuilding everything from nothing. I will spend every dollar this bakery has ever made before I let anyone, reduce him to a line item in a family estate document. So will I, Minjun said. She looked at him sharply. Will you really? Because that woman is your mother. And the last time things got difficult between your family and me, you made a choice. We both know what choice you made. The words landed exactly where they were meant to. He didn't flinch away from them. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to trust me based on who I was then. I'm asking you to watch who I am right now, tonight, and tomorrow morning, and every morning after that. Amara held his gaze for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm started and then thought better of itself. What are you going to do? She finally asked. Talk to my mother. Alone. And make certain things very clear to her. And if she doesn't listen, then I hire a better attorney than Shin Jae-won. He paused. Which, given Shin Jae-won's reputation, won't require tremendous effort. Something that was almost a smile crossed Amara's face. Almost, but not quite. Don't make promises you can't keep, Minjun. I won't, he said. Not anymore. That's the one promise I can make tonight with absolute certainty. His mother lived in the family estate in Songbukdong, a house Minjun had grown up inside. All clean architectural lines and carefully maintained gardens, and the particular, heavy silence of a home where emotions were managed rather than felt, filed away in neat compartments like documents in an organized cabinet. She was in the garden when he arrived. 62 years old, impeccable in a charcoal cardigan, pruning roses with the precise, unhurried movements of a woman who had spent 4 decades cutting away anything that didn't fit the design she had in her mind. You called ahead, she said without turning. That means you're angry but controlled. Good. Sit down. I'd rather stand. She set down her shears and turned. You look tired, Minjun. I am tired, Iyama. I'm exhausted from having versions of this conversation for the last 6 months. He stepped closer across the manicured grass. I need you to withdraw the petition. She folded her hands with the patience of someone who had already anticipated this visit and planned 3 responses. I filed that petition because my grandson is being raised without his proper name, without his heritage, without any understanding of what he stands to inherit. He's 5 years old. Legacies do not wait for convenient timing. Iyama. He stopped directly in front of her, and she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. Elijah lost his father 18 months ago, the man who held him as a newborn, who walked him to his first day of school, who taught him to ride a bike. He is a grieving child who has just discovered his world is more complicated than he understood, and he is navigating it with more grace and courage than most adults I've encountered in 34 years of life. His voice stayed level with effort. And your response to this child's existence is to drag him into a courtroom. His mother said nothing. In the silence, a bird called somewhere in the garden. You want a relationship with your grandson? Minjun continued. Then you earn it. The same slow, honest way I'm earning it. You go to that bakery with nothing in your hands except yourself. You let Elijah show you his drawings and explain the plot of his favorite cartoon in exhausting detail. You eat whatever he puts in front of you and tell him it's delicious. He paused. Can you do that? Or is the park name more important to you than the actual boy who carries our blood? The silence this time was different. Longer. Something moved across his mother's face that he hadn't seen there in years and wasn't sure he could name. She looked away, back toward her roses. I'll call Attorney Shin in the morning, she said quietly. Minjun exhaled slowly. And this woman, Amara. She still didn't turn around. She's a good mother? The best I've ever seen, he said without hesitation. She built a life and a business and raised an extraordinary child under circumstances that would have broken most people. She did it without complaint, without asking anyone for anything. She is remarkable, Iyama. She has always been remarkable. I was simply too afraid to say so out loud when it mattered. The garden was quiet for a moment. Bring her to dinner, his mother said finally. Both of them, when the boy is ready. It wasn't an apology. With his mother, it never would be. But Minjun recognized it for exactly what it was. A door, opening. 3 weeks after the petition was withdrawn, Elijah met his grandmother for the first time at the bakery on a Saturday morning. Mrs. Park arrived precisely on time, and Minjun noticed immediately that she dressed more simply than he'd seen in years. No statement jewelry, no structured blazer, a soft ivory top, comfortable trousers, pearl earrings that had belonged to her own mother. She looked, he realized with a quiet shock, nervous. Elijah had absolutely no such nerves. He burst through the kitchen door wearing his child-sized bakery apron and carrying what appeared to be a rogue cupcake he'd rescued from some disaster, came to a full stop in front of the older woman, and looked up at her with the calm, assessing gaze of someone conducting a serious evaluation. "Are you my Halmoni?" he asked. "That's grandmother in Korean. Appa taught me." Mrs. Park looked at this small, flour-dusted boy with his wild curly hair and his bright, fearless eyes, and Minjun watched something shift in his mother's face. Something old and carefully constructed, silently, simply, released its grip. "Yes," she said. "I am your Halmoni. Can you make duck? My friend June's Halmoni makes the best duck in the universe, and June says I can come over and learn, but I think it would be better if my own Halmoni taught me." A pause. Then, softer than Minjun had heard her voice in many years, "I can teach you. I learned from my own Halmoni when I was not much older than you." Elijah considered this information with the gravity it deserved. Then he grabbed her hand without any ceremony whatsoever and pulled her toward the display case. "Okay, but first you have to try the red velvet cupcakes because Mommy won a regional award for them, and she'll pretend she doesn't want you to compliment her, but she actually really does. She likes compliments. She just makes a face like she doesn't." Mrs. Park glanced back at Minjun over her shoulder, startled by the small warm hand clasped around hers. He spread his hands. "This is Elijah. Nothing to be done about it." By the end of that first hour, his mother was seated at a corner table with Elijah in the chair beside her, both of them leaning over a sheet of paper while Elijah explained the correct way to draw a spaceship. She was listening with complete, genuine attention. When Elijah laughed at something she said, her face broke into a smile that Minjun hadn't seen since he was a child himself. Amara appeared at Minjun's shoulder, watching from the kitchen doorway. "She's different than I expected," Amara said quietly. "Elijah has that effect on people. He gets it from somewhere." She said it without looking at him, but he heard what was underneath it, and it settled in his chest like warmth. The day everything almost collapsed again arrived without warning on an ordinary Wednesday, as disasters usually prefer. Minjun was in the 4th hour of a board meeting when Amara called. He excused himself the moment her name appeared on the screen. In 6 months, she had never once called during working hours. "Amara, what happened?" "Elijah is fine. He's not hurt." Her voice was tight in a way that meant she was holding herself together by will alone. "There was an incident at school." He was already reaching for his jacket. "I'm on my way." "Minjun, you really don't need to." "I'm on my way." He arrived at the school 22 minutes later, which was objectively impressive given the traffic. Amara was standing in the hallway outside the principal's office still wearing her bakery apron, which meant she had left the shop mid-shift without even stopping to change. Her eyes were red at the edges. He resisted the urge to reach for her hand. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. She pressed her lips together. "A boy in Elijah's class. His name is Kim Seo-jun. Apparently his parents saw something online, a gossip blog, one of those horrible sites that runs photos of you with some caption about the scandal of the heir and the secret child." Her jaw tightened. "Seo-jun told Elijah at lunch today that his real father never wanted him. That you only came back because your family forced you to claim him for the inheritance." Minjun felt the words like a physical blow to the sternum. What did Elijah do? The ghost of something complicated crossed Amara's face. He cried. Then he punched Seo-jun in the arm. "Which is why we're here. Which is why we're here." The principal's meeting was uncomfortable and brief. The principal spoke at length about conflict resolution strategies and emotional regulation in early childhood. Minjun sat beside Amara, his hands folded on the table, and listened until the principal suggested that Elijah needed better tools for managing his feelings. Then Minjun leaned forward and said, calmly and pleasantly, that he agreed that tools were important, and that perhaps the school might also benefit from tools to address the environment that had allowed one 6-year-old to weaponize private family information to hurt another child, and that he would be delighted to continue this discussion at the board level if the principal felt that would be productive. The meeting concluded shortly after. In the back seat of the car, Elijah sat with his arms crossed and his eyes fixed on the passing streets. He hadn't said more than 4 words since they'd collected him from the counselor's office. His eyes were still puffy. Amara glanced at Minjun. He nodded slightly just once. Elijah. Minjun kept his eyes on the road, his voice even. I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Silence from the back seat. What Seojun said about me not wanting you. I need you to know that is not true. I didn't know about you, Elijah. For 5 years, I didn't know you existed. That's different from not wanting you. The moment I found out, the moment I knew you were my son, every single thing in my life changed. I canceled my wedding. I sat down with my entire family and told them the truth. I rearranged everything I'd spent years building. Not because someone forced me. Not because of money or inheritance or any of the things that blog was suggesting. He paused. Because you are my son. And there is nothing in my life, nothing I have ever built or owned or achieved, that comes close to meaning what that means. From the back seat, very quietly, he said you were embarrassed by me, because I look different. Minjun pulled over. He put the car in park in front of a small convenience store and turned around in his seat, so he was looking directly at Elijah's face. Look at me, he said gently. Elijah looked. You are the best thing I have ever had anything to do with, in my entire life. You are smart and brave and funny and kind, and you are more yourself at 6 years old than I managed to be at 34. His voice was steady, but only just. I am not embarrassed by you. I am so proud of you that sometimes I don't know what to do with it. Do you understand me? Elijah's chin wobbled. Then he launched himself forward over the center console and wrapped both arms around Minjun's neck in a hug that was more collision than embrace. Minjun held on. After a moment, Elijah pulled back and wiped his nose on his sleeve in a way that Amara pretended not to notice. Is it okay that I punched him? Elijah asked. No, Amara and Minjun said at exactly the same moment, in exactly the same tone. Elijah looked between them. Then, despite everything, he giggled. The tension in the car dissolved like sugar in warm water. But, Minjun added, I understand why you did. Amara reached across the console and touched Minjun's hand. Not for long. Just enough. That night, after Elijah was asleep with the bear and 3 additional stuffed animals he'd insisted were necessary, Minjun and Amara sat on the balcony with tea that got cold while they talked. You didn't have to come today, she said. Yes, I did. Minjun. She turned to look at him. I've been thinking about something. About what it means that every time something hard happens with Elijah, my first instinct now is to call you. She paused. 6 months ago, that would have frightened me. It still frightens me a little. What's the other part? The other part is that you always show up. She wrapped both hands around her cold mug. David always showed up too. That was one of the things I loved most about him. He was completely reliable. You could set a clock by David Chun. A small, sad smile. I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone to show up like that again. Minjun was quiet, waiting. I'm not saying I'm ready to stop being frightened, she said carefully. But I think I might be ready to stop letting the fear make every decision for me. He looked at her in the dim light of the city below. This woman who had survived more losses than one person should reasonably be asked to survive, who had built a bakery and a life and raised a force of nature named Elijah, who had cried in his arms once, briefly, and then straightened her spine and gotten back to work. Ask me again in the spring, she said. He blinked. I haven't asked anything. You have a look. People keep telling me I have a look. Because you do. She stood, picking up her mug. Spring, Minjun. Ask me then. She went inside. He sat alone on the balcony with his cold tea and the Seoul night, and he felt something he hadn't felt since he was 27 years old and falling in love over a Korean textbook. Hope. Terrifying, ungovernable, magnificent hope. Winter moved through the city and gave way slowly, reluctantly, the way Seoul winters always did, holding on to the cold right up until the moment it released everything all at once into pale green and impossible pink. The cherry blossoms came on a Thursday. By Saturday, Uido Park was a dream of petals, and Elijah, who was now 6 and had opinions about everything, had decided the blossoms existed for his personal enjoyment and sprinted through them with his arms stretched wide like he intended to gather every single one. This one's for you, Appa. It's the biggest. Thank you, champion. This one's for Mommy. It's the prettiest one. Thank you, baby. Amara caught the petal before it could escape on the breeze. And then he was gone again, a blur of curly hair and sneakers, cutting a joyful path through the pink and white afternoon. Minjun and Amara walked a few steps behind him, not quite holding hands, but their fingers kept brushing together as they walked, and neither of them moved away. It's spring, Minjun said. Amara kept her eyes on Elijah ahead of them. I noticed. You told me to ask you in the spring. I remember what I said. A petal drifted down and landed on her shoulder. He reached over and gently brushed it away, his fingers barely grazing her cardigan. She didn't step back. I'm asking, he said quietly. She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. Around them, families spread out across the grass, children laughed, petals drifted, and the world continued at its usual irreverent pace, completely unbothered by the importance of this particular moment. Amara turned and looked at him fully, the way she always looked at him, without armor or performance, just direct and honest and completely, terrifyingly clear-eyed. I need to say something first, she said. All right. I spent a long time being angry at you. Years. Even after I married David, even when I was happy, there was a part of me that was still furious at the version of you that walked away. She took a breath. And then you came back, and you were different, and I didn't know what to do with that because I had built such a solid wall around that anger. I know. But here's what I've realized over these months of watching you with Elijah. I've realized that the man who walked away from me was not the man standing in front of me right now. That man was afraid and young, and he made a terrible choice. She met his eyes. And this man drove across the city in 22 minutes on a Wednesday because our son was upset. This man sat across from my mother-in-law's photograph at dinner 3 weeks ago and talked about David with genuine respect. Not because it was easy or comfortable, but because Elijah needed to see that. Her voice softened. This man is who I always believed you could be. Minjun couldn't speak for a moment. So yes, Amara said simply. I'm saying yes. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Her fingers curled around his, warm and deliberate, and this time it was not accidental. Appa, Mommy, look what I found. Elijah materialized from the crowd of petals, holding up a branch that had fallen from one of the trees. It was absolutely covered in blossoms. He looked like a small, triumphant nature spirit. It's for our house, he announced. I'm going to put it in a vase. That's a beautiful idea, Amara said, and her voice was thick with something she was clearly trying to manage. Elijah looked between them. His eyes, which had inherited Minjun's exact shape and Amara's exact warmth, traveled down to their joined hands. His entire face ignited. Are you getting married? He demanded, the branch waving dangerously. Elijah, because I've been practicing my walking. Halmoni said I should practice in case there's a wedding, and I've been doing it every day. Want to see? I'm extremely serious about it. He thrust the blossom branch at Minjun, squared his shoulders, and began a procession of such solemn dignity that a passing stranger actually stopped to watch. Very impressive, Minjun managed. I know. I've been working on it. Elijah retrieved his branch. So are you getting married or not? Nobody is getting married today, Amara said firmly. But eventually? She looked at Minjun. He looked back at her. Something passed between them that was quieter than words and more certain than either of them could have said out loud yet. Maybe eventually, she said. Elijah pumped his fist. I'm going to need a suit. Halmoni said she'd get me a suit. I'm going to tell her to be ready. He pointed at both of them with the blossom branch. Don't do anything without me. Then he sprinted back into the petals, already planning what was apparently going to be a very elaborate event. Amara laughed, full and genuine and unguarded, the kind of laugh she didn't always let herself have. Minjun stood beside her listening to it and thought it was the finest sound he'd ever heard in his life. 6 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday evening in the bakery after closing time, surrounded by the smell of vanilla and warm bread and the specific comfortable mess of a kitchen that had fed hundreds of people that week, Minjun got down on one knee. He had no ring yet. He explained this immediately, which made Amara laugh before she'd even properly registered what was happening. "I don't have a ring," he said, "because I was going to have one designed. I had 3 meetings with a jeweler and I rejected everything because none of it was right, because nothing pre-made is right, and I realized tonight that I've been waiting to have everything perfect before I asked, and I have spent too much of my life waiting to have everything perfect." He looked up at her. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to ask you now, in your bakery, with flour on your apron and no ring and everything imperfect and real." Amara had both hands over her mouth. "I loved you when I was too afraid to choose you," he said. "I have spent 6 years learning what it costs to choose fear over love. I know that cost better than I know anything." He took a breath. "I am asking you to let me spend the rest of my life choosing differently. Every day. Every hard day and boring day and beautiful day. I want to choose you. I want to choose Elijah. I want to choose this, whatever this is, imperfect and complicated and ours." Amara lowered her hands. Her eyes were bright. "You really have no ring at all?" she said. "I have a jeweler on standby." She shook her head slowly, smiling. "Get up," she said. "Come here." He stood. She took his face in both her flour-dusted hands and looked at him for a long, steady moment the way she always looked at him, like she could see all the way through to whatever was truest in him. "Yes," she said. "Minjun Park, the answer is yes." He kissed her then, and she kissed him back, and in the kitchen behind them a timer went off because Amara had bread proving in the oven, and they broke apart laughing, and she went to check the bread, and he stood in the middle of the bakery with his heart so full it felt structurally unsound. "Can I call Elijah?" he asked. "He's at your mother's for dinner." Minjun pulled out his phone and dialed. It rang twice. "Appa." Elijah's voice was so loud Amara could hear it across the kitchen. "Halmoni made duck and I helped, and it's really good, and I only dropped 1 piece." "Elijah, I need to tell you something." A pause. Elijah clearly sensed the weight in his voice. "Am I in trouble?" "No, buddy. The best possible opposite of trouble." Minjun swallowed. "I just asked your mom to marry me." Silence on the line. Then, in the background, Minjun could hear his mother's voice. "Elijah? What is it? What's happened?" Then Elijah, at full volume, to the entire Songbukdong estate. "Halmoni, they're getting married. Get my suit. We need my suit." Minjun heard his mother's sharp intake of breath. Then, astonishing him completely, the sound of her laughing. They were married on a Saturday in April, almost exactly a year after a flour-covered boy had burst through a bakery door and pointed at a stranger and changed everything. The venue was simple. Amara had been clear about that. No 500-person guest list, no merger announcements folded into the reception seating chart. A garden. Their people. The people who had shown up during the hard parts, which is the only reliable measure of who your people actually are. Mrs. Park, who had spent 4 months learning to make American-style red velvet cake from a YouTube tutorial she refused to admit she'd watched, cried at the ceremony, which was something Minjun would treasure for the rest of his life. Amara's mother had flown in from Atlanta 2 weeks earlier and had immediately formed an alliance with Elijah based on their shared opinion that Minjun was very handsome but also sometimes too serious, a position Elijah defended vigorously and at length to anyone who would listen. And Elijah, who had practiced his ring-bearer walk every single day for 6 weeks, performed it with the gravity and precision of someone who understood they were participating in an important historical event. He walked so slowly and so solemnly down the aisle that the guests began to laugh softly, and then Elijah looked up and saw them laughing and grinned his enormous, face-breaking grin, and everyone laughed harder, and the whole garden was bright with it. He made it to the front and presented the rings with great ceremony. Then he planted himself directly between Minjun and Amara, which was not technically part of the plan. "Elijah," Amara whispered. "You're supposed to stand to the side, remember?" "I know," he whispered back. "But I want to be in the middle." She looked at Minjun. He looked at her. The officiant, who had done hundreds of weddings, waited with patient amusement. "Stay in the middle, then," Minjun said. So Elijah stood between his parents while they exchanged their vows, one small hand in Amara's and the other in Minjun's, his eyes moving between them with an expression of such complete, uncomplicated happiness that there wasn't a dry eye on that side of the garden. When the officiant said the words Minjun could now kiss his bride, Elijah announced, loudly and to everyone, "Finally!" And the garden erupted. Minjun kissed Amara while their son stood between them demanding to know when the cake was coming. And the cherry blossoms drifted over everything, and his mother laughed, and the afternoon held them all in its good golden light. Later, much later, after the cake had been consumed with ceremony, after Elijah had danced until his legs gave out and been carried to a chair by his grandmother who pretended not to love doing it, after the last guests had drifted into the evening, Minjun found Amara standing at the edge of the garden, her shoes in her hand, looking up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. He stood beside her. "Happy?" he asked. She turned and looked at him, his wife, this extraordinary woman who had survived everything and built something beautiful from what remained, who had raised a child who pointed at strangers and claimed them as family. "Yes," she said simply. "Are you?" He thought about the bakery, about flour-covered hands and burned pancakes, about Mario Kart and monkey bars and a small voice saying "Catch me if I fall," about a year of showing up, and what it had given him that no boardroom or balance sheet ever could. "I am so happy," he said, "that I don't entirely know what to do with it." Amara laughed and took his hand, and they stood there together in the quiet of the garden, while their son slept in his grandmother's arms nearby, dreaming whatever 6-year-olds dream about. The stars came out one by one. Minjun had walked into a bakery to order a cake for the wrong wedding. He'd walked out with his whole life. If the story reached something in you, share it with someone who believes that real love is not a single grand gesture. It is 10,000 ordinary moments of choosing to show up. And remember, sometimes the family you were always meant to have is waiting right where you left it, ready to pull you toward the monkey bars and change everything. We've come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.